Welcome to the Village Voice, Episode 3. I am your host, Connie Shryock, and joining me today is resident Jean Higgins. Hello, Jean.
Hi, Connie.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me. I feel very honored.
Oh, I'm glad you do. It's my honor to have you here. Now, Jean told me she was going to start out with a story, so we're going to cut right to that story. Jean, take it away.
Well, I thought this would set the context for how the rest of my life happened. When I was 5 years old, I announced, and people who know me are not surprised that I announced, not asked, and said I wanted to go see my little girlfriend who lived in a town that was, 15, 20 miles away. And they said, "Oh, how are you going to get there?" And I said, "I'm taking the train." So, to their credit, they called up the parents. They made the arrangements for, and all that sort of thing. They put a note on me. They introduced me to the conductor. And then I remember the conductor coming back to check on me, and I got so incensed that he had to be checking on me all the time that I ripped off my note and threw it under the chair like he wouldn't know who I was. Now, I got there. I didn't have any problem, and it built in me a great sense of confidence and self-esteem that I could take care of myself, that nothing bad was going to happen to me. And in the years since, I've used that to go alone in places like the villages in South Africa and in the untouchable villages in India, and so on. And I always felt safe, and nothing ever happened to me.
Wow, that is quite a story. And you were 6?
5.
5? Wow. Where did that confidence come from?
I don't know, but I know that's where it started. I mean, I don't know why I did that, but it sure was a building block for my life.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
So where did you spend your growing up years?
Do I have to tell you?
Well, that's up to you.
I may have to kill you.
I'm worth it.
I grew up in West Virginia. I went to school there, went to college there, and left there when I was 22, vowing never to return.
Yeah? Why was that? What was it about
Oh, you haven't been to West Virginia, have you?
No, I haven't had the pleasure.
Oh, West Virginia doesn't have any opportunities. I mean, It's a beautiful state. If we moved everybody out and made it a national park, we would really have something. But, you could go there and buy a 4-bedroom house for $29,000 probably.
Wow.
It's really depressed.
Those days are long gone, though, even there. $29,000.
Yeah. Probably not much more than that now.
You probably found that quite stifling.
I did. I was ready to see the world.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
None.
So the only child, huh?
Only child. My father died when I was 9. So it was just my mom and I.
And the two of you just were confident together?
Yes, I guess.
Were you close with your mother?
Oh, yes, of course.
That's really cool. That's really cool. So from West Virginia, where did you go next?
Well, my mother said when I graduated from college, she was going to move to Florida, and why didn't I go there and get a teaching job? And as it turned out, I didn't want to get a teaching job, and then I couldn't find any. So on the way back, I stopped to see an aunt and uncle, and he was in the Air Force. But my aunt said, "Why don't you join the Air Force?" And I'm pretty sure I did not know that there were women in any of the services. And so we talked about it a bit, and I went home the next day, and my mother said, "Did you find a teaching job?" And I said, "No, I'm going to join the Air Force."
How did she feel about that?
She was not surprised.
It sounds like you were always pretty independent and you were always adventurous.
Yes, very much so. Everything except food.
Yeah?
That's the one thing I was never adventurous about when I was traveling in these countries. But
That could be a challenge.
yes,
So let's get back to the Air Force. When you joined the Air Force, what was that like, those early days?
when I walked in to my very first assignment, there was a grizzly old major who said, "There's only one place for girls like you," and he pointed to the typewriter. But he said, "I can't do that. They won't let me do that." So he, of course, put me in charge of the worst section of the personnel office, which was the records keeping. We had 20,000 people at Keesler Air Force Base, and getting the records in and out and keeping them up to date. They always got terrible inspections and didn't do well, and somehow we managed to do pretty well. And when they had an inspection, we really got a very high rating. And so he was so happy that A, I didn't get pregnant, and B, B, that we had gotten this wonderful inspection, that he wrote me the best, probably one of the best performance reports I ever got in my entire career.
Whoa. And he was kind of a chauvinist, so well done you.
Well, that was 1962.
Yeah, 1962. So where was your next assignment?
Should I tell you what happened in my first assignment?
Yes.
One day, my airman answered the phone for me and came in and said, "It's General Kennedy for you." Well, first, I didn't know any General Kennedys, and secondly, generals don't call first lieutenants. And a woman said, "Would you hold for Attorney General Kennedy?" And of course, that took my breath away, but it all happened so suddenly that I didn't have time to get very nervous. And so on came this very lyrical Boston voice,
Right.
who we made a little chit-chat about the weather and so on. And he said, "Okay, I'm calling you because I've got John Smith here in the office. He's an old friend of mine from back in Boston. And he's come in because he said that his nephew has told him that he's getting thrown out of the Air Force, and for no good reason." And he said, "Frankly, we doubt that, but we wanted to talk to the person who actually knows." And since I was a person who processed discharges, I happened to have his case on my desk and knew about it. So I told him, he went AWOL a couple of days and he was late for work, and he did, whatever he did, all those things. And he said, "I thought so, and so did his uncle, and thank you very much for all the information." Then I got yelled at by my bosses because they expect to get those kind of calls, not me.
Right, a first lieutenant talking to Robert Kennedy, the
Yes.
Attorney General of the United States.
Right.
That's mind-blowing.
Okay, so where did I go next? You asked me. I got a call one day. "You're supposed to be interviewing me."
You know what? You're doing a great job. I'm just going to let you roll, Jean.
One day I got a call and they said, "Okay, it's your turn to go overseas." And I said, "Terrific. Where am I going?" And they said, "You're going to Hawaii."
Ooh.
And I was so excited, and I watched South Pacific over and over, practiced my hulu dances and all that sort of thing. And just maybe a week before I was due to leave, they called me again. And they said, "Well, we have good news and bad news for you. Here's the good news. You're still going to Hawaii. The bad news is you're only doing a stopover en route to the Philippines."
Oh, the old switcheroo, huh?
Yeah. So I ended up in the Philippines. That was my first overseas tour.
Well, tell me about the Philippines.
Oh, I actually liked the Philippines a lot. I mean, it's a tropical environment, and I had never seen, banana trees and things like that. And it gave me the opportunity to jump on hops and go to Hong Kong and to go to, all kinds of places, which reminds me of another story.
Please be my guest.
We're going to run out of time.
We'll take the time, all the time you need, Jean.
Oh, one day I got a little upset with my boss, so I went in and asked for 7 days leave, and he gave it to me. He was as glad to get rid of me, I think, as I was him. But anyway, I went home, packed a bag, went down to the Mac terminal, and said, "Where have you got a plane going?" And they laughed and they said, "Oh, that's cute, Lieutenant or Captain, whatever I was. Where are you really going?" And I said, "I'm going wherever you had a plane." And they said, "Oh, it's too bad you weren't here 10 minutes ago." And I said, "What happened 10 minutes ago?" And they said, "We had a British plane come through here on its way to Singapore." Well, we never had military planes going to Singapore because we didn't have any military people there. And then he said, "Well, wait a minute." And he went in the back, and he come back, and he said, "Grab your bag," or he grabbed my bag, and put me in a Jeep, took me out to the end of the runway. There was a plane sitting there, a prop plane, going, ready to take off, and they dropped down the steps of the plane, and up I went, and off I went to Singapore.
Wow, you got the red carpet treatment.
Yes.
How was Singapore?
Oh, I really like Singapore.
Yeah?
I like any place. I like 62 of the 63 countries I've visited. So
That's a lot of countries.
yes.
We won't make you name the 63rd that you didn't like. But what were some of your favorite destinations?
Wherever I was.
I like that.
It's so hard to say. I mean, it's what day it is and what kind of mood I'm in. And, some of them were very challenging. Some of them I learned a lot from. Some were just very scenic. It's wherever I was that day.
That's a good attitude. I like that. Wherever you are is where you're at, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
So when you, as you went through your career, what are some of the other duties that you attended to? What were, the things that you did? A lot of record keeping, but other things as well?
Oh, sure, all kinds of things. I was on a White House task force for a little while, and my last assignment was the most interesting one I had. I was a disaster preparedness officer, and I had an additional duty. And my additional duty was, if we had a natural disaster anywhere east of the Mississippi, like, major flooding or a hurricane or massive fires or whatever, I theoretically, and put that in quotes, had the authority of the Air Force Chief of Staff to kind of manage that administratively. For example, to call up Charleston Air Force Base and say, I need an air evac plane to fly into someplace or other and do so and so. Fortunately, in 3 years, we never had a national emergency. And within a month after I retired, I think it was the big hurricane that hit Charleston, South Carolina, I can't be sure. But anyway, I went in to see my boss, and my replacement, and said to him, "None of this happened on my watch."
So as you worked your way through your career with the Air Force, what was your ending rank?
Lieutenant Colonel.
Lieutenant Colonel, that is impressive. Impressive. What was it like working in a primarily a man's world? And I know you probably get asked that question a lot, but it's impressive that you were able to rise to the rank of Lieutenant Colonel.
Hey, you have a general officer right here, Marilyn Coffinger.
Yes,
She and I were second lieutenants together at Keesler.
you were?
Yes,
Oh, that's awesome.
yes. So, I don't know. I don't have a lot to say on that subject.
Yeah,
You know, I kind of ignored it all and
yeah.
just did my job.
That's the best way, isn't it?
Yes.
Put your nose to the grindstone. So after you finish your career with the Air Force, what did you do next?
Well, I did a couple things. I do want to tell you that I went to New York City after 9/11,
Mm-hmm.
and they had thousands of volunteers. They could not begin to use all of the volunteers, so they wouldn't take people in. But I gave them a long story about having been a disaster preparedness officer and all that sort of thing, and talked my way in. And then I was just a gopher, but it was such an incredible experience to be there during that period of time.
Wow, that must have been quite an experience.
Yes. But the big thing I did was I was sitting home reading a magazine, and it said, how would you like to photograph the Taj Mahal at sunrise, the pyramids at noon, the Great Wall of China at sunset? Of course, not on the same day. But I thought, well, yeah, I'd like to do that. So I read the article. I picked up the phone and called them, asked them a few questions, and said, sign me up. And what it turned out to be is a program called Semester at Sea, where they take college students around the world 100 days while they are on the ship. They're taking lessons. There's a faculty teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're in port, they either have their own time or sometimes their class does something, together for their class. But they take along 10% of the ship can be seniors. And the first time they did that, they took it just because they hadn't filled up the ship and they needed the money. But what they found out was that seniors added a whole new dimension to the ship. Because some of these kids who are like 18 years old, off the farm in Iowa, I probably shouldn't say that, and get homesick. And, some of them took to having an older, wiser, experienced person traveling, so they decided to add that dimension to the ship. And so the first time I went, I paid for it. It's quite expensive. It's gotten more expensive. But as a senior adult, I had my own time in port, and usually what I would do is go out by myself because I wanted to photograph. And I guess I didn't mention that I went to photography school.
Oh, you left that out.
Yes, well, I did.
Photography school.
Yes, for 18 months. And so I was a photographer, and I got some stock agencies to represent my work, and I have about 1,500 images that have been published. But anyway, I wanted to go around the world to travel and take pictures. Mm-hmm. And so I paid for that, and I had the best time. And I decided that I really wanted to do this again because they go the opposite direction and they go to different countries. And so I cozied up to the administrators on the ship. I wrote the most remarkable resume that you've ever seen. We don't write a lot of resumes in the Air Force. So I wrote this resume, and I helped the professors. I graded papers. I monitored tests. I did anything I could do to get my name known. And sure enough, lo and behold, they hired me to go around the world.
That's great.
Imagine, not much. They don't pay much, but they paid me to go around the world. And I had a really, really, really easy job, and I had a lot of time. I had the time in port to myself.
And a chance to take lots of photos.
Oh, thousands.
That's so awesome. That is so awesome. Can we get back to the stock photo thing? Can you
Sure.
explain a little bit about some of what that is for?
Sure.
What's it?
Sure,
What
I
it's
can.
used for? What it is?
Sure. If you are publishing a 6th grade geography book, you cannot hire a photographer to go around and take pictures of the Parthenon and of the, Great Wall of China and all those sort of things. So what you do is go to an agency that has probably millions of images, and you lease the right to use. You don't buy the picture. You just have the right to use it in your geography book. So what I did, what people like me do, we just freelance. We photograph anything and everything, and we send it to a stock agency. And then if they're able to market it, if it goes to somebody, we get half, they get half. Again, I didn't make much money from it because they don't pay much. But you know what the very first one I had published was?
What?
A tomato worm. Not a lot of people photograph tomato worms.
No.
And of course, some advertiser for something, who knows, or maybe just illustrated in a textbook or so on. But that was my very first sale.
You must have happened upon that.
It was my backyard.
That paid off.
Yes.
Got you started.
Yes.
What are some of your other hobbies, Jean?
I don't have any.
I am familiar with some of your photography because it's appeared in The Villager on the front page.
Yes.
So anybody who reads The Villager, which I'm sure everybody reads The Villager.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
They all see your photos on the front.
Well, I love photography, and I've now, I'm so immobile, I can't carry big cameras and big long lenses and so on. So I have taken up cell phone photography, and it's amazing what you can do with cell phone with the apps that are available. So the quality of my cell phone photography, you can't blow it up big, but just looking at the quality in smaller images is every bit as good as my big camera.
So for people who are a budding photographer with their own phone, what are some of the apps that you use?
Oh, I probably have 10 or 12. The one that everybody must have is called Snapseed, and it's free.
That's
So
the best kind.
that
my
is the
favorite.
very best. And if anybody wants to get it and they want me to teach them how to use Snapseed, I would be delighted.
Awesome. We'll take you up on that. Paul's shaking his head. Yeah. We're going to be your first students.
Okay.
So I want to know a little bit about how you became interested in Friendship Village and what brought you here.
Well, Barbara, my partner, had said all along, I will not live in one of those places. If you're going by yourself. I mean, she was just adamant. And I think she was carrying around some memories, some old kinds of facilities and so on. And suddenly one day she said, I think we should go look at some of those. And I said, what? What changed your mind? And she said she realized, that I was getting to the position where I needed to be someplace where there was more care available, and that maybe it wasn't such a bad idea after all. And after we came here and toured the place and heard about it, we walked out the door and said, we're coming here.
Very nice. Very nice. And when did you move in?
July last year, a little over a year.
July of 2018?
Yes.
Wow. Well, you're still learning new things and finding new things you didn't know about.
That's very true.
I wanted to just take a moment to just let everybody know that, we're pleased to have Jean here, but I want to wish everyone out there and thank them for their service. We are coming up on Veterans Day, and I think it's important to recognize all those people who serve and have served. So I wanted to take a moment to do that and to remind people about the Veterans Luncheon on November 11th. So please take a look at the Villager. We want people to be attending and be recognized. And then I wanted to also say, Jean, that this is a time in our interview when we unveil the big question. Oh, if you could see, she just sat back in her chair like she's afraid. I can't believe you would be afraid.
No, bring it on.
Okay. All right. Here's the big question, Jean. Let's imagine that for one day and one day only, you have been made the executive director of Friendship Village. What are you going to do on your one day?
Whoa. Lay plans for more dining facilities. We're going to have more people coming, and we're going to need more dining rooms and a variety, and particularly the deli, or the, what do we call it?
The cafe?
Cafe at night often has very, very, very long lines.
Ah, okay. Any other changes you want to make, or, you've got one day of power, so use it wisely.
It's just perfect. I would step in the footsteps of Emily and Cole and do exactly what they're doing.
Oh, excellent. Well said. Well said. Well, I want to thank Jean for being our guest today. It was our pleasure to have you, and thank you for jumping in. I love how fearless you are, and I love your stories, so come back anytime, Jean.
Thank you very much. Now you get to decide which of those I made up and which are true.
Oh, a challenge, a challenge. Thank you,
might add
Jean.